My grandson borrowed my watch for a date, then pawned it. He said he'd buy it back when he had time. I checked the ticket and smiled. The name on the pawn receipt was mine. If you're seeing this on your phone, or on a TV in a quiet living room, or on a bus with the city humming around you, tell me where you're watching from right now, because this begins the moment a boy I loved like my own heartbeat stood in my doorway and asked for something I could not replace. He smelled like cheap cologne and shower steam, hair damp, smile quick, shirt still wrinkled from the dryer. "Grandpa," he said, "can I borrow your watch?" "Just for a date. She likes guys who look grown." He rolled his empty wrist and did a little bow like the gentleman he'd seen in black and white movies I used to show him when he was small. It was the watch my wife gave me long ago, back when we counted life not by hours but by fences painted on weekends, stories told at bedtime, and how many times the sun set on the lake behind our house. I felt the weight of that watch in my hand, the smooth backplate warm from my skin, the engraving in her neat slant, and I saw his hopeful face and did the foolish, holy thing old men do when they remember a boy's first steps and forget his last mistakes. I pressed the watch into his palm. "Bring it home tonight," I said. Over his shoulder, at the top of the stairs, my son watched with flat eyes and a grapefruit slice in his mouth. "Don't make it sentimental, Dad," he said. "It's a watch, not a shrine." My grandson's grin wavered, then came back strong. He slid the strap tight. "I'll be careful," he promised, and he left in a burst of cold air and laughter that hung in the hall after the door shut. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, the one with the mark where my wife once dropped a hot pan, and I waited out the ticking in my head with an old radio whispering news. The house was so quiet I could hear the pipes settle. The clock on the wall shrugged past midnight. I told myself young people lose track of time, that the first spark of love can make an hour feel like a minute, and a minute like a sunrise. The phone buzzed at 2 in the morning. "A message. I'll bring it back. Need a little time." The words looked normal until you felt them, and then they felt like a hand moving yours to sign something you did not read. The next day, I went to my grandson's apartment with a bag of oranges and a folded sweater he had left at my place. The door wasn't locked. Inside, the smell of energy drinks and aftershave hung low and heavy. The sink had a stack of plates with dried sauce, and the couch had a dip the size of a person who had not been sleeping well. On the table lay a thin slip of paper that caught the light when I moved. I picked it up and my mouth smiled on its own. The pawn receipt had my name on it, not his. Not my son's, mine. Do you know the color of a betrayal? To me it is the gray of that receipt, the way it tried to look like nothing important. I slid it into my wallet, next to an old photo of my wife in her shawl by the lake, and I walked out with my oranges and the sweater because I am old enough to understand that when a problem shows you its shape, you don't yell at it first. You look at it until it blinks. I drove to my son's house because I wanted to see if the rot was in one apple or the tree. He was in the kitchen, slicing grapefruit again, because my son likes to pretend life obeys neat lines. His wife stirred coffee, one eye on the phone. "He pawned it?" she said when I placed the bag on the counter and the receipt beside it. She made her face look shocked, but her fingers kept stirring long after the sugar was gone, spoon clinking like a clock on a tiled wall. My son didn't look up. "Kids make mistakes," he said. "We'll fix it when we have time." I said, gently, but not softly. He used my name to sign it. My son set down the knife and picked up the receipt between 2 fingers as if it was a leaf from a dirty gutter. He read the name. He read it again. "Maybe they needed an adult to sign," he said. "Maybe the guy at the counter wrote it wrong." I nodded like a man nods to a horse that has already thrown him. "Maybe," I said, and I folded the paper back into my wallet. There are 100 ways to fight, but I have learned the coldest way is to wait for the next mistake to be the last one they ever want to make. When I wait, my mind walks backward. It walks to a kitchen with steam on the windows and a radio playing a love song that belonged to everyone and no one. It walks to my wife's hands, the knuckles flour-dusted, the ring making a soft tap against the pot as she stirred. She is wearing that shawl, the one that always smelled like the lake at evening and her jasmine perfume. She holds out a small box with a ribbon and says, "You lose minutes when you build a family. This one will give them back." Inside, the watch. The strap new and stiff. the face catching every angle of light. On the back, her slanted engraving, "For all our minutes that mattered, and the many more to come." Our son, hair like a puff of dandelion seeds, tugs at her dress and says, "Is it a bracelet?" And we both laugh the way you do when you think your life is simple and your house is a ship that will never see storm. I remember the day I taught my son to tie his laces, how his fingers were clumsy and he scowled, and how he looked up at me when he finally did it on his own, like I had given him the moon. I remember the rules my wife whispered to me in bed when the house slept. Promise me we make this a home, not a museum. Promise me we teach him to return what he borrows. Promise me we never pretend time is cheap. I said yes to all of it, because I loved her, and because I believed love could hold its shape forever. It cannot. It is like water. It keeps the shape of the glass until the glass cracks. The next morning I learned where the crack ran. My son's wife posted photos from a dinner just for family. My grandson grinned in a new jacket, raising a glass. My son had that tight smile he gets when he is pleased with himself for reasons he will not share. The chandelier glittered. The table was set with the good plates, the ones my wife bought, the ones that should have held our holiday bread and our quiet apologies. No invitation had come to me. I made a pie anyway, the way I used to, a simple apple with too much cinnamon because that is how my grandson likes it, and I carried it to their door. My son opened it a crack. Warm air, laughter, and the smell of expensive meat reached me in a soft wave. "Dad," he said, "tonight's not good." Over his shoulder, I saw the corner of the table, and I saw my grandson look and look away, and I heard someone snicker like a match being struck. "It's your mother's recipe," I said. He lifted one shoulder. "She's gone," he said, and the door closed like a lid. Later, a small box arrived at my house. Inside, a plastic digital watch, the kind with a rubber strap and numbers that glow a sickly green. The note said, "Practical. Doesn't need winding." I placed it next to my wife's shawl, and it looked like a toy beside a prayer. When you want to see who you're dealing with, you go to the place where people pretend money erases stories. I went to the pawn shop. The fluorescent lights hummed. The glass case held gold and not gold, cameras that once caught babies' first steps, guitars that once played wedding songs, bracelets that once promised forever. The owner, Sethi, had sharp little eyes and a careful mouth. He nodded when he saw me, and tilted his head toward the back counter where a camera stared at us with the bored stare of a dog on a porch. "Came to reclaim?" he asked. His finger tapped the receipt I set down like it was a heart he was checking. "Name matches the ticket. You." I said, "I didn't bring it." He shrugged a small shrug that said he did not care who brought what as long as the numbers added up. "Show me the paperwork," I said, and he slid it over. Someone had signed my name. They had tried to copy my angle on the A, but they made the tail too long and the stem too thin, and the whole thing leaned the wrong way, like a tree in shallow soil. "Who brought it?" I asked. He glanced at the camera screen on the wall. "Two men," he said after a pause. One young, one older. Related, I guessed. He didn't say the rest. He didn't need to. He pointed at the timestamp, and I knew because of the coat my grandson was wearing and the watch glitter on his wrist. And because behind him was my son with his careful mouth and his hand on the boy's shoulder, guiding it forward. The silence between me and Sethi grew a spine. "Hold the watch," I said. "Don't sell it. Don't melt it. Don't move it." He pursed his mouth. "Storage fee," I nodded. "Bill me." My voice had no heat. It had something colder. It made his eyes flick to me with a small respect that was not friendliness and not fear, but a thin bridge between them. At home, I boiled water and poured tea into my wife's cup, as if to set a place for her memory. Then I pulled the old safe from the closet wall and set my hand to the dial the way a priest sets his hand to a book. The door opened on the smell of paper and metal. Inside lay a black folder, slim and bloodless, a flash drive like a small tooth, and the deed to the house with my wife's maiden name braided through it like a ribbon. I held the folder and felt the weight of words people sign when they still believe in words. I called the lawyer I had not called since the funeral, a man named Irfan, who speaks slowly like every line is a bridge you have to test. "Pull the trust documents," I said. "The ones with the conditions." He was quiet long enough that I heard the click of his old pen. The conditions? He said. Yes, I said. The one about fraud, and elder coercion, and forgery. He said he'd check. I said, no, I remember. I want them ready. Then I set my phone face down and let the room breathe. There is a difference between noise and pressure. Noise is what people use when they still think they can drown out the truth with volume. Pressure is what happens when you place one pebble on another pebble until the whole thing looks like a mountain. I decided to use pressure. I sent a message in the family group chat no one ever uses unless they want to be seen to be loving. I wrote, come by Sunday evening. I have something for your birthday, son. My son likes to hear the word birthday even when it isn't his day. He enjoys the idea of a circle of faces turned to him. A thumbs up came from my daughter-in-law. A shrugging face came from my grandson. A short okay came from my son. I turned the living room into a stage. I set my wife's photo on the mantel, where the late light kissed the glass. I folded her shawl on the arm of her chair so that anyone with eyes would understand where she sat in my mind. I placed the cheap digital watch in its box on the coffee table beside the black folder, so its plastic strap could look like exactly what it was, an insult wrapped as advice. I called Sethi and asked him if he could stop by to clarify a receipt. He said he was busy. I said the word forgery and camera backup and email, and he said he could give me 20 minutes, maybe 30. That was enough time for a knife to turn in the light. They showed up with good smells and tight faces, the way people do when they think they are walking into a party and then remember who is hosting. My son stood in the doorway and looked around with a quick scan that measured what he could take from the room if the room ever lost its voice. My grandson kept his hands in his pockets as if his fingers were cold. My daughter-in-law kissed the air next to my cheek and said, "We brought wine," which means we brought something to hold when it gets tense. I nodded and let them come in. My son went for the envelope on the table before hello could finish forming. I put my hand over it. He looked at my hand. He looked at my face. He let his own face go soft the way people do when they practice being innocent in the mirror. "We can fix this," he said. "It's a misunderstanding." My grandson swallowed and stared at the carpet. "I'll get it back," he said to his shoes. "I just need time." I said, "We will fix it," but I kept my eyes on my son. "Not through your mouth," he flashed his teeth. "You always loved theatrics, Dad," he said. "Shall we cut to the cake?" My voice came out flat and calm, and even I heard the cold of it. "Not today, Ethan," I said. "You'd be in the way." He blinked because I hadn't called him Ethan in years. Not since he started asking people to call him by a nickname that sounded like a faster car than the one he could afford. A shadow fell across the hall. Sethi stepped into the room and stood with his hands at his sides like a man who knows he is not welcome but has brought proof anyway. My son's smile thinned into a line that meant war. I placed the pawn ticket on the table, then the forged receipt. "This is my name," I said, tapping the loop of the A with one finger. "Written by a hand that doesn't know patience. This is my signature, except it isn't." Sethi cleared his throat and glanced at my son, then at my grandson. He said 2 men brought a watch, one young, one older. The older one told the younger where to sign. I thought they were father and son. He didn't say more. The room did the saying for him. My daughter-in-law said the word harassment, like she had practiced it out loud on the drive over. I opened the black folder. The paper sighed. I took out the trust my wife and I wrote after the day in the hospital when the nurse pulled the curtain closed and the monitors kept humming out of habit. We had sat at the kitchen table and watched Irfan's hands as he drew lines that would hold our house and our savings, and the pieces of our lives we could stack on shelves. We made a clause because love without boundaries becomes pity, and pity becomes rot. The clause said that any heir who used deception, forgery, or coercion to take what was not yet theirs would forfeit their share. That portion would be moved to a charity that trained young people in trades and skills, named in my wife's honor. Junior members, the clause called them. The young. My son stared at the lines like they were written in rain on glass. "Junior members?" he said, almost laughing. "What does that even mean?" I took out the second page. My wife's handwriting, small and steady. "Protect the child from the parent's mistakes if it comes to that." "It means," I said, and now I looked at my grandson and not at his father, "that you still have a way back if you want it." He looked up finally. He had my son's eyes, which are my wife's eyes, which is another way of saying we fell in love with the same look at different times in our lives. His eyes were red around the edges like the rims of cheap cups. "I messed up," he said, and his voice cracked on the up. I thought I could buy it back. My son started to speak, but I raised a hand and he swallowed his words like hard bread. "We're going to fix what you did," I said to my grandson, "and we're going to fix what he told you to do." I clicked the TV on, and the flash drive fed it a set of stills from the pawn shop camera. The images were gray, but the story was clear. My grandson at the counter. The watch shining like a small moon in a glass case. My son's hand on his shoulder guiding him where to stand. My son's finger tracing the signature line. My grandson's head turned up for approval, the way young heads tilt toward old shadows. No one spoke. Silence sat down with us like a fourth guest. I pressed a button on my phone, and Irfan's voice filled the room, as if the law itself had a throat. He explained in slow words what forging a signature meant. He explained what it meant to use someone's name to obtain money. He explained what the trust clause was designed to do. "You can contest," he said, as if reading my son's thoughts before even my son had them. "You will lose. The evidence is visual and signed. The intent is plain." My daughter-in-law grew pale first. She watched the screen as if the stills were a mirror and she had only now noticed the dirt on her face. My son turned that same pale a moment later, slower, like a man who still thinks he can rewrite history in the next breath. He tried to smile. He could not find the muscles. "Dad," he began, and I shook my head, not unkindly, but like a door moving in the breeze and then catching. "I have already signed the transfer," I said, sliding a bank slip across the table. "The portion that would have been yours is now funding scholarships and apprenticeships in your mother's name. There will be young men and women who will learn to fix cars and computers and pipes and people's teeth because of you. Ethan, it is the best use of your talent I have seen in years." He flinched as if I had struck him, but my voice had not changed. It stayed flat, the way it had when I told him as a boy to come home before dark. I turned to my grandson. "There is a path for you," I said. "It is a narrow path. 6 months community service at the charity center. No shortcuts. You will sign a written apology to Sethi and to me. You will come with me tomorrow morning to the pawn shop, and you will tell the truth to his face. We will redeem the watch with money you earn, not money you borrow, and certainly not money you trick from a piece of paper." He took a deep breath that rattled a little, like his chest was a closet full of old hangers. "I'll do it," he said, and I believed him, because he looked like a boy who had just seen the border between child and man and understood the toll. The room shifted. My daughter-in-law looked like a person calculating the weight of silence. My son tried to stand. I said, "Sit," and he sat before he realized what he had done. He looked up at me, and I saw in his eyes the small boy with the tangled laces, the one who looked to me for the moon. I thought of my wife's letter and the square way she shaped her T's, like a little hammer. I thought of the nights we sat up and argued about kindness, about how soft a boundary can be before it stops being a boundary. I thought of how love can become a way to excuse. I thought of how easy it is to love someone so much you enable them to be someone they are not proud of. Then I thought of what love looks like when it grows a spine. "You can come for dinner on Sundays," I said to my grandson, "after you finish your hours at the center. You will tell me what you learned. You will not bring excuses into my house." He nodded. I turned to my son. "You do not come until you have something I have not seen from you in years." He blinked. "What?" he said. "Work," I said. "Honest work without an angle. And a truth that costs you something to speak out loud." They left in 2 cars. The first car pulled away with a squeal because my son likes to make small noises sound like big exits. The second car rolled onto the street quiet and careful. My grandson drove that one. He paused at the corner and looked back. I lifted my hand. He lifted his. He turned and was gone. The house felt like a chest after a long cough, empty and relieved. Sethi stood by the mantel and looked at my wife's photo. "She would like the scholarship thing," he said. I said, "She would," and I adjusted the shawl because I could not adjust the years. You think that is the end, but stories like this have a slow second breath. The next morning, the sky wore that light the city gets after a night of drizzle, bright and soft at once. At 8 o'clock, my doorbell rang, and there stood my grandson in clean jeans and a plain shirt, hair combed like a schoolboy's. He held out a paper. "I wrote it," he said. The apology was short, with no excuses, almost like a poem. I folded it into my pocket. We did not speak much on the drive. The pawn shop buzzed the way it always does, tired lights doing their best. Sethi nodded without a smile. My grandson stepped up to the counter, cleared his throat, and told the story to the person he had wronged. His voice wobbled, then steadied, then dropped into a place I had not heard come out of him before. Sethi listened with his mouth tight and his eyes busy. When my grandson finished, Sethi looked at me. I said nothing. He looked at the boy. After a moment that held the shape of a new thing, Sethi nodded once. "Make it right," he said. We redeemed the watch with cash earned from work my grandson had done with the charity's warehouse in a hurry the night before. Moving boxes and sweeping floors and taking splinters out of his palm with a pair of tweezers, while a man named Malik told him that men who work with their hands sleep well. The watch was warm in my palm as if it had saved some breath for me. I did not put it on my wrist, not yet. I wanted to remember that time is not a thing to strap down, but a thing to hold with care. There are parts of life that repair like a button on a shirt, quick, almost easy. There are parts that repair like a bone, slow, painful, honest, revealing where stress will always live. My grandson began his hours at the center. He learned to unload trucks without cracking, to mount a printer cartridge without breaking the clip, to listen to people who spoke slowly because they were working out the words that matched their inside. He came on Sundays and told me things he learned, how to read a blueprint, how to lead a small team, how to apologize without using the word but. He stopped wearing the cologne that tried too hard. He kept his voice where he could hear it before anyone else did. Sometimes he would look at me like a person standing on a dock watching a boat he finally built with his own hands. Those were good Sundays. My son did not come. Word drifted like litter that he had argued and slammed a door and slept on a sofa, and then gone to a place where men talk to men who do not care that they have fathers. He called once and hung up when I answered. I thought about calling him back and did not, because not every silence is an absence. Some silences are a demand for a real sentence later. Sometimes I walk by the lake and the air smells like pine and damp stone, and a wind runs its fingers across the surface. I wear the watch now and then, but not every day. Some days I set it beside the plastic digital one. I keep the plastic one too because I need reminders not to waste what I have left. The digital watch blinks like a toy for a man who forgot what a gift looks like. The old watch rests like a quiet truth. On my wife's birthday, I hold the leather strap and remember her voice saying, "This one gives minutes back." I used to think she meant the watch. Now I think she meant choices. You make the right ones, and minutes come back to you wearing faces you can look at without shame. One evening, months later, there came a knock on my door that carried no arrogance, only weather. I opened it and found my son standing there without his fast smile, without wine, without the look that counts a room for the nearest advantage. He looked like a man who had learned what hunger feels like and has brought no excuses. He said, "I heard the boy finished his hours." I nodded. He did. He said, "I got a job." And the words were strangely shaped in his mouth, like trying out a new language. "Warehouse." "Night shift. It's not much." He lifted his hands like a man who understands that sometimes the best trophy you can bring is a spine that did not bend. I did not invite him in. I stepped outside. We stood on the porch and listened to the street make its little noises. He said, "I'm sorry." He said it twice, like a nail set, and then tapped. I waited. He told me details no one had asked him for. The way he coached a boy to sign, the way he told himself it was harmless, the way he felt rich for an hour and poor for a month. I watched his face and waited for the thing that would cost him to say. It came slow and heavy. I was teaching him to be me. He shut his mouth as if to stop anything that would ruin that sentence. I nodded. "You will come on Sundays," I said, "and you will start with the dishes." He smiled, but only a little, like a boy who has not earned the big smile yet. He came in, not as a guest and not as a conqueror, but as a man with sleeves to roll up. My grandson arrived later with a bag of groceries paid for by his new pay stub. He hugged his father, and it was quick and careful, and it did not look like a movie hug. which is another way of saying it was real. That night, after the dishes, after my grandson told us about a machine that prints labels faster than a boy can blink, after my son asked where the shawl had gone and I pointed to the chair where it had been all along and he saw it, I went to my room and lifted the watch from its box. I strapped it on. It ticked against my skin with that old patience. I looked at my face in the window and saw an old man, and behind him the ghost of a woman with jasmine in her hair. And I said out loud, "We are making a home again. Not a museum, slowly, with work." The lake wind barely touched the curtains. The house made a small sound like a body taking a breath at last. So listen, wherever you are, on a bus chewing the edge of a ticket, on a couch in a country where the word grandpa is different, but the story is the same, in a kitchen where your own watch sits by a sink that drips at night. If someone you love uses your name to take what is not theirs, do not shout first. Do not weep first. Sit down with your minutes and make a plan. Remember that love is not an open door forever. Sometimes it is a door that asks for a knock and waits for the right voice. Remember my wife's rule, a home, not a museum. That means you set boundaries and dust them and use them. It means you keep your shawl where it can be warmed, not embalmed. It means you teach the young to return what they borrow and to say sorry as if their feet cost them something to move. It means you teach the old, even the ones with your jaw and your stubbornness, that time is not cheap and names are not free. And when the minute comes to turn the table, do it with a slow smile and a quiet voice. That is the sound of justice that does not need to raise itself to be heard. If this story reached you, if it made you think of someone you need to call, or someone you need to forgive with conditions, or a thing you need to redeem with your own hands, then let me know where you are watching from, and tell me what time you think it is in your life. And if you want more stories told plain and true like this one, with hooks that catch the heart and endings that give minutes back, please like, share, comment, and subscribe.